So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to frame today's discussion about mentoring. Some of you may be familiar with this document. This is the Women in STEM Decadal Plan. It's a 10-year strategic plan for the evolution of women in STEM, co-authored by the Australian Academy of Science, together with our colleagues at the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering. And one of the recommendations coming out of this plan was around mentoring. And so what we thought would be nice is to use that as our building block for conversation today. And we're going to look at two dimensions of that. One is this recommendation around the development of best practice guidelines for mentoring. Now, of course, guidelines can only be developed around once we understand what kind of outcomes we're looking for. What are the characteristics of really good mentoring? So I want to tease some of those out from you as a way of us then being able to inform what best practice guidelines might look like. And then the other area that we're going to look at is how we incentivize mentorship in STEM organizations. How do we encourage, how do we mobilize our STEM organizations, whether they be universities, whether they be industry organizations, to take mentoring seriously and embed it into the culture of their organization. So I'm going to ask you to share some ideas that you have around that when we get to the discussion group shortly. Now, today's guest, we're absolutely delighted to have with us today, Dr. Melina Georgousakis, who's the founder of and CEO of Franklin Women. And Laura's going to pop Melina's details in the chat for you so that you can keep in contact during and after the session. And Melina and I are going to have a bit of a conversation about her STEM journey and the way that Franklin Women works in this mentoring space and some of the insights and experiences that have come from that. But before Melina and I have a chat, we thought it might be nice to ask you to tell us a little bit about your experience with mentoring. So what we'd like you to do is grab your device or that spare browser tab and go to menti.com and enter the code that you see on the screen, 76898199. And what you will see are a series of tick box options that describe what your mentorship experience has been like. Some of you may have had experience or not, whether you've been a mentor or a mentee, has it been positive or negative or a bit meh. So we just like tick any and all that are relevant to you. And we're curious to see what kind of mentoring experience this group of people have had today, and this will guide the conversation that Melina and I have. So as you can see, Laura is sharing the live results. As you hit the submit button, we start to see what kinds of patterns emerge. So this is interesting. And again, as part of the follow-up to these sessions, we'll be publishing all of the polling results from the 3 sessions together, which paint a very fascinating picture, as I'm sure you can imagine. So what we're seeing here is slightly more formal, slightly more informal than formal, slightly more as a mentee, but also plenty of you have been a mentor. An almost entirely positive experience with a few meh on the side, and then largely around professional development, but also discipline specific, which is an interesting kind of outlier to how sometimes mentoring is seen. So thank you for that. That's a really nice snapshot to see kind of where you are at, so that we can make this conversation and this discussion today as useful as possible. So Melina is the founder of Franklin Women, as I said, which is an Australian social enterprise that's grown into an empowered community of like-minded individuals and organisations who are committed to creating a health and medical research sector where women thrive. Melina and her team have enabled many early career researchers to connect with mentors, as well as learn skills in leadership to enhance their careers in medicine and the health arena. Welcome, Melina. It's such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you, Alison. It always sounds so much more impressive when someone else reads it out, so thanks.
Well, my pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about your experience as a kind of a woman in STEM. Tell us a little bit about your journey into the STEM arena and what role mentorship has played in that journey.
Yeah, okay. I have to think back because it's evolved quite a bit, both my career and also the role of mentors. So I followed, not so much anymore, but a very traditional academic career in health and medical research. So I've always been a boffin from a very young age. So I knew the only thing I was ever going to do was science. So as soon as I finished uni, I did a Bachelor of Science degree. And then you sort of got shuffled into honours. No one in my family had done a PhD, or no one before me had gone to university. So I didn't even know what a PhD was. But after I had done honours, my supervisor was like, I'll pay you $24,000 a year and you'll have a job for the next 3 years and you'll keep researching group A strep. And I was like, yeah, sold. So then I ended up doing a PhD. But I didn't really know where that would lead me. It was just the opportunity that presented. And at the time, I also did not know what a mentor was. I'd never come across the term. No one had ever mentioned it before, so I was quite ignorant to it. It wasn't until after I did my PhD, I did my first postdoc, and I started understanding more about the sector. And I knew more about myself as well. And I kind of was getting a gut feeling that traditional research wasn't the best fit for me. And I was starting to think of where else I could use my skills, but I was very passionate about health research and making a difference. And that was when I started talking to people and maybe getting some informal mentorship. But again, I didn't know that's what it was. But I had a few people who were really pivotal that I would have chats to that really helped me transition into health policy. But more recently, I have a few examples of quite formal mentor relationships with me that have made a really big critical difference to my life. And I'm very happy to share them with you now or later on. But now the word is something that I talk about often and something that I've tried to play a real active role in through Franklin Women, because I've experienced now firsthand what a difference it's made to my life, and I've seen it be life-changing for others.
So I'm interested to pick up on the point that you made there, that, you know, it's possible that you were getting informal mentoring but would never have even called it that or didn't have language for it. And I wonder if, again, in your experience with the work that you're doing with Franklin Women, where that is a reasonably common situation for many of us, where we wouldn't necessarily call, you know, it's some interactions that we have with someone mentoring because it feels like it's a bit formal, but, you know, maybe it's role modeling or something like that. But there does seem to be, you know, the potential for that. There's a lot more mentoring going on than we'd necessarily put that label on. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, I completely agree. And funny, language is such a powerful thing, because what it means to one person could be different to somebody else. And that's why it's really tricky, because both for mentors and mentees, now that it's a term that's being used a lot more, you could ask someone to mentor you, and in their head, it could be, oh, this intense commitment that requires hours of their time and emotional involvement. And in your head, you're just thinking, you know, I'd love to have a couple of cups of coffee and work through some things with you. And so one of the things, both through Franklin Women and I've learnt myself, is when I've sent a few emails to people to ask to mentor me. But I've been really clear about what I think I need and what how they could help me, and sort of made it not contractual, because that sounds a little bit funny, but just being really open around my expectations so everyone knows what they're committing to. And I think it's really helped with the yeses.
Yeah, right. So kind of manage expectations on both sides as part of that initial outreach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kidding yourself.
So the other thing I'd like to just touch on is, you know, the point that you raised there in your you know, the story of your journey there was the difference between the informal mentoring and then the formal mentoring. Can you talk a little more about what you experience those differences being, and why both of those might be useful at any point in a career journey?
Yeah. And look, you know, it seems hard to prioritize time for talking and being mentored. But I really advocate for having people that sort of fit a few of those hats, and because they kind of fit for purpose for what you need, and you can move in and out of those relationships. And I always having a mentor, like I said before, isn't a forever commitment. Their relationships, like everything else. And I remember when I was out at Westmead at the National Centre for Immunisation Research. So I had just moved from the lab and have moved into a policy role.
Right.
And I had questions that I didn't feel comfortable asking my boss or supervisor, because, you know, they just employed me and I wanted to live up to expectation. But I really wanted to chat to someone informally within the organisation who understood it a bit more and who I could learn from. So there was literally a woman who we just made it part of our routine to have sort of coffee once a month and chat with. And that's a really good example of an informal relationship that I had. And, you know, we'd take pauses when they were busy or I were busy, and then it became really needs-based after a while, but it was quite relaxed and casual and fun. But I told her that, you know, she was providing me guidance, and I felt that she was mentoring me. There was no pressure, but I had put a label on it. But then the other side, and the formal part, I guess, because I noticed on that slide, less people had put formal. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think a formal mentoring relationship is right for everyone all of the time, but there could be times where they are. And I'll give you an example for myself. So Franklin Women runs a formal mentoring program, and I think we might get to that conversation later. And so that's a very specific activity that has a specific purpose. But I have had formal mentoring. I've never taken part in my own mentoring program, but I kind of wish that I could, or I want someone else to, because I would really get a lot out of it. But when I started Franklin Women, so I'm a scientist, I have zero business experience. I learn about social entrepreneurship and social enterprise as I've gone. But I was really realizing that it's that business or entrepreneurial expertise that I had no support in. And I actually reached out to someone to say, you know, I'd love to meet you for coffee and just have a chat. But this woman was very high up in the business sector, and formal mentoring, or more formalizing mentoring, maybe is a better way to say it, was just part and parcel of their sector. So she was more experienced with, okay, so we met for coffee, we had a chat. I sort of said what I'm dealing with, and she offered to me, she said, look, would you like some mentorship? She goes, but if we're going to do this, we need to have some terms around it. And she took on a formal mentoring role to me, for me, in which she said, we're going to meet this regularly. This is what I expect. So I want you to come with an agenda or what you want to deal with. I can give you an hour and a half of my time. And she really formalized the relationship. And I have to say that lifted a weight off my shoulder, because when I was meeting someone informally, which was still really valuable, when you're the more junior person or someone that feels like you're benefiting from someone else, you can, you know, get apologetic, and you don't want to take too much of their time. You don't want to ask too much of them.
It feels like an imbalance of some kind.
Exactly, which is sort of fine once you accept if that's what you need. But this woman really formalized it for me. So I knew the terms of the agreement, and I really I applied myself to this relationship like anything else, because she allowed me to. And I think giving senior people, or really anyone, if I now mentor someone more junior or feel like I want to commit to it, I have that conversation, because I think it benefits you, but it also benefits the person on the other side. So I think we can have formalized mentoring without always needing mentoring programs or initiatives, so to speak.
Right. Gosh, that's a really interesting insight. And again, it just goes to show, doesn't it, the importance of language, where, you know, formal, formalized, not the same thing necessarily. And those sort of nuances are things I think that we all need to spend a little bit more time thinking about and reflecting on. So let's talk about Franklin Women now, and the mentoring programs that you run. Walk us through how that works, and perhaps tell us a story or two about some of the impact that you're seeing from that program.
Yeah. too easy. You probably have to wrap me up, Alison, because I can...
Keeping an eye on the time, don't you worry.
do. Plus I'm a good Greek, so I could wax lyrical. So if anyone doesn't know about Franklin Women, it's my side hustle. So basically it's a community that really aims to support the careers of women. And we do a whole lot of things. And one of them is events, and it's networking, but it's professional development. And our mentoring program came off the back of an event that we did on mentoring, because I realized that I really had no idea about this idea, but everyone all of a sudden was talking about it. And so it was a real practical breakfast. We had nice food. We got an expert speaker on mentoring. And it literally was some facts, some tips, debunking it. And then we had a panel of the expert, but also some women in our sector who had applied it. And it was really valuable to those in the room. But we did a survey, because as good scientists, we always do surveys to the point that people are asking us to stop doing surveys. We did pretty much what your before, in that we said, do you have a mentor? Do you want to mentor? If you have, how were they? What do you think the gaps are? If we had a mentoring program, would it be valuable? Because we're volunteer, we're not going to start something if people have access to mentoring programs in their organisation. But out of 100 people in the room, everyone completed the survey. It was clearly something they were motivated about, and everyone had the opportunity for informal mentoring. But what they really needed is something structured to give them the confidence and the tools, but also they wanted the opportunity, which was all Franklin Women's about, but to connect with people outside of their organisation, which was interesting with that discipline question. Because if you're going through a tricky time with an individual, or you're thinking, oh, maybe I want to go out on my own and build my own lab, or maybe I don't want to leave research, I want to leave research. When I decided I wanted to leave research, like, my PhD supervisor was gutted. Like, I felt like I was letting him down, so I could hardly have that conversation with him. So the Franklin Women Mentoring Program came out about a couple years later, and I guess how we've approached it is again, it's very specific with its purpose. So I looked at the evidence for women, and for the health and medical research sector, it's around mid-career level where you start to see the split. So we want to support that pinch point rather than losing women from our sector, just give them that support to keep on that leadership trajectory. So we're very clear about who it's for, and it's for women mentees, but our mentors are obviously of any gender, because particularly when there's a large proportion of men in leadership positions, we want to engage them in that mentoring process and some of the challenges, so they can be a part of the solutions as well. And it's great because the mentees get matched with mentors from other organisations. We give them the tools to have their informal mentee-mentor relationship over a 6-month period. But I guess what supports that is there are these touch points where the mentees and mentors go through some professional development workshops around how to have effective mentoring relationships and how it differs from sponsorship. And also other things like inclusive leadership and all that sort of jazz. So the mix together has been quite successful.
Yeah, great. And what's interesting too is that professional development dimension that you were just talking about then, for both the mentors and the mentees, and that this really should be, you know, something that everybody gets something out of, rather than this imbalance that you were talking about before. Is that purposefully designed into what you do?
Yeah. And for, I guess, 2 reasons. Everybody knows when you seek out support from someone who's in a leadership position, they're all very, very busy. Anyone actually is within science. And when we engage the mentors in the program, because it has so many touch points, you really get this, like, it's a big commitment out of their diaries. Not only are they meeting for an hour or 2 every couple of months or month, but they've got to have these 4-hour workshops. By the end of the program, so we do content evaluations throughout it and a 1-year follow-up outcome evaluation. And at the end, it's the mentors who are like, we need more time, you know, we need another workshop. Like, it's hard to engage them on the idea of it, but once
Yeah.
they go through and see how much they get out of it, and their teams and their students and their organizations, it's really a shift in mindset by the end.
So the other thing that I understand is the case is that you were the inaugural chair of the EMCR forum. And so I imagine too that the path that you followed through your STEM career, including the sort of STEM adjacency that you were just describing, has seen you view this idea of mentoring through a range of different lenses, both personally through your own experience, but also as you have either interacted with or now in your role at IMNIS, created opportunities for others. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience has been like for you and the observations you've made at the various points along that journey?
Sure. I think part of my passion for reaching out to the Academy to say, could we do something together? And that's how the EMCR forum sort of began. It really was driven from a lack of mentoring in my career, I think, when I reflect back. And I think I could see how others, their career trajectory was different with greater support, mentoring and sponsorship compared to those without. And I had had intermittent mentoring over the course of my career up until that point. Very similar to the participants today, a lot of it was informal, quite a bit of it was meh. And in fact, I think, I can certainly think of one experience that was quite negative and probably held me back in the end. It was one of those very paternalistic type of styles of mentoring, very directive, that didn't seem to benefit me in a large number of ways. And that happened very early in my research career. And so I think, people become mentors and people become mentees for very different reasons, and everybody's reason is unique and every relationship is unique. And so when we seek mentorship and when we want mentorship, what are we really asking for? And that's something that only you can truly answer. And therefore your expectations from a particular relationship may be completely different to the person on the other side of the table. And that's why when I did reach out to the Academy and I met with Bob Williamson, who was the then Secretary for Science Policy, we had a very frank conversation about what we could do, what we couldn't do, and how we could connect together even, because he was going to have to mentor me through a process of professional development as well. And so that was a conversation we had very early and very clearly, and kudos to Bob for really opening that door for that conversation. And I think through mentorship with him, that's really how rapidly things could come together, and how he could see strengths in me that I hadn't even seen in myself, my ability to network, my entrepreneurial ways, my potential visionary leadership. And so he really fostered those and gave me the confidence to really blossom in that role. And so in a very short time, I'm meeting with ministers, I'm meeting with politicians, I was connecting in a very confident way. We held 2 national symposiums and we made a lot of positive change happen. And I'm really, really proud of that group because it has endured and it has grown, and kudos to the Academy for supporting it. So to me, since that time, my need for different styles of mentoring has changed. I have always been one to actively seek mentorship. I do not sit back and wait for it to come to me. That has been throughout my career at different points. Just sometimes it's easier to find than others, right? Because when you have a formal program, they're ready and available. It's much easier to find a mentor than when you don't. And so I think that's why we do need those opportunities for structured mentoring as well as informal mentoring, organic opportunities for mentoring to grow from just connecting. Opportunities like this, you never know who you're going to meet online, just having a conversation. And so all of those opportunities do need to be presented, and different mentoring styles have meant a great deal to me. I actively seek mentors from different sectors. So I have an industry mentor, a government mentor. I still connect with academic leaders, but they're probably at a different level now to where I was 10, 15 years ago. And so I think something that I have also found really meaningful and important to do is to ground yourself with a reverse mentor or a team of reverse mentors. And they are younger people who are coming through the system now. They have a vision, they have purpose in what they do. Their key drivers for entering STEM may be very different to mine. How they want to work may be very different to mine. A lot of young people look for a flat structure. I learned that from them. What's going to really inspire them and make them want to come to work every day? And so I learned that too. And what kind of leader would you want to work for? You know, that feeds my own development as well. And I feed that back in. But I still also seek that high level senior experienced mentorship for where I'm going in my future as well. And so my career isn't over. And so I continually aim to improve and develop. So I guess in many ways, it has ebbed and flowed and it has morphed and changed in a very positive way. But mentoring's always been fundamental to everything I do. And mentoring is truly the door to sponsorship. I say this again and again to people. And, you know, sponsorship is ultimately having a champion who will stand up for you and say, yes, this person's worth talking to, this person's worth networking with, this person has credibility in what they do and how they do it. And so to me, it's a great opportunity.
So Maggie, that point that you just made there around that, you know, mentorship is kind of a stepping stone or almost a foundation piece towards sponsorship. Can you talk a little about the difference, a little more about the difference between those two? Because quite a lot I see those terms being used quite interchangeably, and it can be a little bit opaque sometimes, the intention behind both of them. So could you give us a bit of a flavour of what you characterise the differences between those two things?
Sure. The core differences is that level of advocacy and investment from the mentor, right? So every sponsor really will invest a great deal of time. They may coach you, they may support you, they may network you actively. They really will point opportunity to you and you to opportunity. So they're a real connector as part of your career. And often they are the kind of people who you'll hear a senior level professor say, oh, in the last 20 years, I've had this one person who's always been there for me. They've just been a champion throughout my whole career. That is a sponsor. And that is actually what a lot of, certainly through the Industry Mentoring Network in STEM, I'm based at the other academy, the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering. And so we host IMNIS, and IMNIS really, a lot of the mentees when they come in, these are PhD students, early stage postdocs, their expectation is often that they're seeking a sponsor. They really want someone who's going to get to know them incredibly well and champion them for a job or an opportunity or a career going forward. And that can very well happen for them. It takes time though, because the difference between a mentor and a sponsor in terms of the risk to the mentor is significant. A mentor really can support you and give you, you know, some guidance, and then they can walk away and they don't think about you much after that, right? You have your 1 hour coffee and off they go, and they'll leave it there. Whereas a sponsor actively takes risk and they put their own reputation on the line to give you greater credibility. So your reputations are much more closely aligned. And in that way, therefore, they're investing in you. They're giving you something incredibly valuable, and that cannot be overlooked, that cannot be underestimated. And what they are doing for you with that endorsement is almost like a reference letter, if you like. It's a public reference letter. And so there's often the phrase that a mentor will talk to you, but a sponsor will talk about you, and they'll tell other people how good you are or what you're good at, right? And so the difference between those two things is very clear to me, but a lot of people just don't understand where that line is drawn. But the beauty of mentoring is that it sets the groundwork for a fantastic sponsorship going forward. That person as a mentor, particularly through IMNIS, we have a 1-year program. So these are longer term relationships that are built over time. We have phases that we encourage throughout the course of the program where we say, get to know each other and then set some goals and then make some active progress and then have a reflection period. And just that process and that journey together really develops a project, if you like, where you're project managing your future and the mentee drives it. And therefore, often by the times of about 2/3 into the relationship, a really strong partnership has been formed, and that can often turn into a sponsorship. So we know that we have 7 out of 10 mentees, our alumni mentees, are still in contact with their mentor. They're still getting advice and they're still getting recommendations and connections through them. That to me is a win. That's fantastic and an outstanding outcome just all by itself as far as I'm concerned.
So let's briefly talk about IMNIS before we move into conversation groups where people will be able to have a chat to Maggie more directly. But can you just give us a quick overview of the work of IMNIS and how people might be able to connect with it?
Definitely. So we're actually recruiting now. So now is the time to look. Universities and medical research institutes sign up to participate as members. And then their PhD students and postdocs are selected by their organisation. So I encourage you to reach out to the Graduate Research School or your professional development, your head of learning and professional development at your organisation, and just ask them if they're participating in IMNIS. We also, I see our website's gone up. If you visit our website, we have our member organisations listed there, so you can see if your organisation is participating. I see Priya on the line, and she is an IMNIS alumni, so there are lots and lots of connections there. We have over 950 alumni mentees now around the country, and these are great people to talk to about what the experience is like. But essentially we team up a mentee, an early stage researcher, with a high level influential industry leader. They have coffee 1 hour a month is the commitment we ask for, and we also provide a lot of support and guidance and expertise as a team, the IMNIS team underneath. We've got experience across all different sectors in the professional STEM sector, and so we can really give guidance and support. Scott Cummins is also our program manager online today, so don't be afraid to ask Scott some questions if you meet him in the room as well. I think it's really an opportunity for people to undo the black box of industry. So we all know, at least in some concept, of what an academic career looks like, right? We know it's a very linear pathway. You're meant to work your way up the academic ladder and hit professor, and we pretty much know what it's going to take to get there, particularly now. I love that you're having a Reboot STEM conversation. I'll give that a plug. I think it's really valuable with the EMCR forum led by Emma Burrows. I think that conversation around metrics and what it takes to succeed in academia is a really powerful conversation to have. But I also think that it's important that we encourage people to look beyond the academic bubble as to what else is out there in the broader sector. We know that the majority of our graduates will ultimately end up working outside of academia, and they need to understand where the opportunities are and where a STEM qualification can really take them.
So Jenine is the founder and CEO of the Tech Girls Movement Foundation, as I said, and the CEO of Adroit Research. In the past 6 years at the helm of Tech Girls, she has engaged over 8,000 schoolgirls in STEM entrepreneurship across more than 1,000 schools, matched with more than 1,000 mentors who have volunteered more than 7,500 hours of their time. Epic by any definition. Jenine, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome you to our STEM Women conversation today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Hi, Alison. Hi, team. Thank you for having me. One of my favourite things to talk about. So I'm so grateful to be here.
So let's start a little bit talking about your journey into this world of STEM. Give us a bit of a sense of how you found yourself in the STEM arena.
What a great question to start with, Alison, and mentorship is absolutely key to that. So it's just perfect, even though we didn't arrange that, but that's how it works out. So I guess I was one of a few girls in an IT degree back in 1997. There was about half a dozen of us out of a room of about 300 young smelly males, it seemed like, in the lab. To be honest, at the time I was a mature age student, trying to find what am I going to do in life. I was pretty disengaged in school because I think I was just really bored, to be honest. I didn't find anything that really got my attention. And I washed cars, I worked in supermarkets, I did all this stuff once I left school, and then decided if I wanted to do something useful with my life, I need an education. So I decided I went to TAFE, actually. I did a diploma of business. And then I was like, yeah, that's interesting. What next? And then I realized I needed something more specific. And IT was quite new at the time, back in 1997 or 96, 97. And so I thought, if I do IT, there's always something new to learn. So that would be a great way to go. So I got into a degree, studied for the next 2 years. And I was very fortunate that I had a number of really strong female lecturers in my department. So I was at Griffith Uni in the engineering department. And in my first year, I discovered information systems. And information systems for me was a way of bringing people into technology, which was the thing that I so desperately wanted to see. So I'm not a programmer. That's not really the way my brain works. I'm more interested in the why behind things rather than the what. And so having some female lecturers who coincidentally were doing research on women in IT at the time, back in 98, they got an ARC grant, I think. So they were pioneers in the space looking at women in IT at the time. And the reason they started a research project was because they saw very few women graduating from the IT degree at graduation each year. And the women they did see, there were very few white Australian women. They were mostly Asian women. And they thought, this is really an interesting phenomenon. So what's going on here? So that led to a whole bunch of initiatives around running mentoring programs for high school girls, running one-day events for, I guess, high school girls to come onto campus to learn about technology and meet role models and so on. And I guess just exposure and awareness to as many young people as possible. So I sort of bumbled along for many years doing that sort of for free, in terms of volunteering and not formalizing it in any way. And then I started my PhD in 2007, which wasn't related to gender or women or girls at all. It was in illegal file sharing in online communities, something completely different. And I guess partly that reason was because I didn't want to be known for what my supervisors were known for. So they became my supervisors for my PhD, and that was their research space. And I wanted to carve my own space. And at the time, there was a bit of stigma around research on women in tech, which has now become women in STEM. There were stories of women not getting promoted because they studied that for their PhD and things. So I just didn't want to disadvantage myself in any way. So I sort of went and did something else, which was really valuable. And then I guess the women in STEM kept calling me back. So at that time, I finished my PhD in 2010. I'm like, what do I do next? I've got this whole world in front of me. And I guess along the way, a couple of years before, I did put a pink book together, which was called Tech Girls Are Chic. And it was highlighting different women in technology. And the reason for that book was to actually give girls who came to our one-day events something to take away with them. They had something physical they could talk to their parents and their friends about, and something of their own, have a bit of ownership over that. So that was something that was really positive. And then I finished my PhD and go, well, I have a bit of time to probably do this properly now and have a plan, or, a plan. It's a very loose plan, but at least some time and opportunity to explore this further, because I still really care about this, like 11 years after I started. So I had a way to channel some of my passion. So Tech Girls Movement was launched in 8th of March, International Women's Day 2014, at our state library in Queensland, which was a great event. And I literally had no idea what I was doing, to be really honest. I'm not sure I still do. No, I have more of an idea now, but we're all making it up. Yeah. We're all making it up, right? And that was a campaign called Tech Girls Are Superheroes, because we all need to have capes in our lives, and because we all have a superpower. And being a superhero is not about being good at everything, but it's about tapping into that one thing that makes you different, but makes you awesome. And I found this was a really great way to connect with girls. So going to girls and asking them what their superpower is a really powerful thing to be able to do. And particularly with tech, so I'm in the T part of STEM. And when I talk to girls, I ask them if they can do something technical, and they say, no, I can't do that. They say, well, if you're a superhero, how would you do it? And they give you 10 different ways on how they would do it. Right. So there's something powerful about tapping into that inner you, and whether it's a cape you put on, whether it's a piece of jewelry, whether it's a red dress, whatever it is that makes you feel that power. Amy Cuddy and her, poses.
Power poses, yeah.
I know, right? She's now liking my Instagram post. I'm like, oh, I'm just fangirling because I just love it. It's so powerful, though. You can't deny that, and the research is behind it. So yeah, then started this Tech Girls journey, which is now this is our 8th year in Tech Girls, and I think actually my bio where you got those figures are a little bit old because we've now reached nearly 11,000 girls after COVID last year, and we've got another 150 mentors on board this year in the program. So it's going great guns. And essentially we have a 12-week STEM entrepreneurship program where we teach girls how to build apps to solve problems in their local community. And every team gets a mentor, and there's something powerful about that mentor experience.
Yeah. So let's talk now a little bit about that mentoring experience, because just listening to you telling your story there, and obviously, less so much the digital and more the anthropology side, the human dynamics side of the digital seems to be the thing that you're interested in. And from what I understand, the Tech Girls movement is very much at that, getting girls into this mindset and this sense of capability and I can, and the role that mentors play in that, particularly young mentors that feel like they're not that far removed. Would that be a fair way to characterize it? How does the mentoring dimension of Tech Girls work?
It's to be honest, one of the key parts of our program. There are 2 reasons why our 12-week program work. And one is that girls get to find a problem they care about in the community to solve. We don't tell them the problem. And the second is the connection with mentors. And there's something profound for young people to have an adult they don't know take them seriously.
Yeah.
There's just something about that. And so we match every team of girls with a female mentor who meets with them for 1 hour per week over 12 weeks. And we have a lot of new mentors this year. I think at least half of them are brand new for the first time, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. And we certainly do see imposter syndrome in our mentors. And I remember presenting at a conference a couple of years ago, and a very senior technical woman came up to me who had a double degree in maths and things. And she comes up, I'd love to be a mentor, but I don't think I'm qualified. Like, oh my goodness, are you serious? You are so overqualified to be a role model to our young people. And I think that's the thing that I think what's really interesting for us to separate is the difference between being a role model and being a mentor.
Okay.
And so not every role model is a mentor, but pretty much every mentor is a role model.
Right.
Which I think is interesting. And we don't often see ourselves as that role model and see we have something to offer, but again, anything you can offer in terms of a positive perspective on the world and a fun way of solving problems and telling young people they can do this. If I can do this, you can do it, is one of the most powerful things we can do.
So thinking of the people who are joining us today and anybody who might be watching this after the event, how can they be part of what you're building and creating and sharing with Tech Girls, even if they haven't had any mentoring experience before?
Yeah, we would absolutely love you to come and join us, and all first timers very welcome. One way, well, we are in our 4th week of our 12-week competition at the moment. So one way to get involved would be to actually sign up as a judge for our competition this year. So at the end of 12 weeks, early August, we will be going to judges, and we get industry judges like yourself, and you get to see the great work that our girls are doing. And it takes about 30 minutes per entry online. You can do 1 to 10, totally up to you how inspired you are by them. But it's a great way to get to know what young people are doing. And I mean, if you feel inadequate reading them, don't worry, I feel inadequate every day of my life working with young people because they're so incredibly creative and they don't have the barriers we do as adults. So I don't let that dissuade you. You absolutely have something to offer. And there are so many young girls particularly who don't get the opportunity to meet a real life woman in STEM. And that in itself can be life-changing. Just meeting you and spending an hour with you can be life-changing. So get on board as a judge and then come on board next year as a mentor. We'll launch on International Women's Day again. But yeah, get to know the process and just it's about helping young people and co-designing and working together, really.
So let's just flip really briefly from kind of the individual experience of mentoring and mentorship to the more organizational. Tech Girls has a number of partners that you work with, and you're one of our Women in STEM Decadal Plan champions as an organization, which is an absolute delight. Can you reflect a little on the Tech Girls experience in interacting with your partners, whether or not they're formal partners or other organizations, about creating those organizational or institutional conditions to improve the way that women in STEM can be appreciated and developed and make a huge contribution?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Alison. And we work very closely with our strategic partners, and a lot of our mentors do come from them, absolutely.
Right.
And we find within those organizations, often they get a cohort, you know, some of them have, say, 15 mentors together in the organization this year. So they then have this internal way of mentoring each other and building this whole momentum around mentoring. And what we've found is organizations that do formally come and be part of our program and offer up mentors for the 12 weeks, they have a competitive advantage over their competitors, because unless you're the Googles of the world, you can't necessarily pay that kind of, you know, not everyone can pay that kind of money and offer those kinds of perks. So what else can you offer to your staff, particularly your female staff in a technical workplace? And by giving them an opportunity to mentor in our program, it gives them a way of giving back and feeling connected where they may not otherwise. And they're probably more likely to stay with your organization because you're giving them that opportunity, whereas if they're in one that they didn't get that opportunity. So I think there's something there for organizations. There's a untapped resource there. And we've certainly seen mentors come in. I know one organization, the first year, one of the mentors came in and she was so scared to get up in front of anyone, even her colleagues. By the fourth year, she was mentoring all of her colleagues. She was out in front of teams. She was came to Silicon Valley with us and did amazing things with our girls. And just seeing her confidence build over the program has been incredible, which I never expected.
Gee, that's interesting. I mean, really what you're talking about there is very much an intrinsic value that an organisation can bring to the table, and of course then gets the benefit of the experience that the mentor has in developing themselves through their mentorship experience, but also then potentially as an organisation seeing the value of mentoring itself and perhaps instituting some of those activities or some of those programs internally as well. So ideally you kind of have a complete feedback loop there, right?
Absolutely. And we do it each year, and sometimes they get time off, you know, volunteer time to volunteer and spend how they want. We tap into judges that way as well, who can be men or women. And so there's a whole organisation buy-in, which is great.
Brilliant. So just going to close our this part of our conversation. We'll be chatting to Jenine throughout the rest of the session, but I've got one final question for Jenine, which is, what is your favourite tip for someone who wants to get more out of their mentorship experience?
Oh, that's a curly one. Oh, I think try to, imagine yourself as like a 12-year-old, I guess. We've had mentors who say, I don't know what to do with talks about with 11-year-olds because I haven't hung out with 11-year-olds since I was 11.
Right.
But I think that, I think have fun with it. Most of all, have fun. And I mean, you know, I put my sparkly shoes on, I wear a cape, I do silly things, I take selfies with them, I do whatever it takes just to kind of go, you know, we can do this together. And I'm not this scary out there person. I am literally just like you. I'm just a bit older.
Yeah, great. So we're going to have 2 rounds of conversation of 10 minutes each. So speed, talking, sharing, thinking, experiencing together. And then we're going to come back together in between for 5 minutes to reflect, share, and then move into group discussion again. I'd encourage you to carry the key ideas and themes from your first conversation into your second, so that we make this conversation and this time that we're spending together today as generative as possible. You can possibly hear Louise capturing madly all of the insights that we're hearing throughout today. And we as the Academy will be taking all of this on board and building it into the work that we do as the steward of the decadal plan, you know, propagation, if you like. So our first conversation theme for 10 minutes is going to be, what are the characteristics of a positive mentoring experience? Many of you said in your opening poll that it was largely positive. So let's try and figure out, what are those characteristics? What makes a mentoring experience positive? And that would then inform what best practice guidelines might look like, what kinds of things they should call for, what kinds of things we think are important to ensure that guidelines represent. So we're going to give you 10 minutes to talk amongst yourselves, and then we'll see you back here shortly to share your feedback. See you in a bit. But we'd like you just to add a few words that came out for you in the conversation that you just had with your colleagues. So what are these characteristics in a word or two? Let's start getting some of those out so that we can see where some of the conversations ended up, but also where some of the commonalities might be. So Laura's going to share the screen now as people start to put forward some of their thoughts. And I'm going to ask Jenine to stay with us as we start looking at some of these. and perhaps reflect on the experience, Jenine, that you've had with the Tech Girls mentoring programs, whether some of these characteristics look familiar to you, and the ways in which you might, through your work, be building some of these in a more purposeful way than happy accident. So nice to see non-judgmental, very big in the middle of the screen there, open-minded, and learning. Jenine, if I can ask you just to comment on that one in particular. One of the things that came out for me listening to you talking earlier was the opportunity for not just the mentees to learn from their mentors, but the mentors themselves having a learning experience by doing something that perhaps they've not done before. Is that something that you help mentors come to grips with, how they can learn out of being involved in being a Tech Girls mentor?
Yeah, great question, Alison. I think we probably do it not so explicitly through the curriculum, and by having this way of saying meet with your team once a week, but we don't say when it has to be. You can make your own arrangements with them, but please do meet with them regularly and have that connection. And we've had some mentors who, you know, the one with the 11-year-olds took them to the movies, for instance, to bond with them.
Oh, wow, right.
So finding other ways to connect, it doesn't have to always be about the thing that you're being involved in mentoring for. It can be other ways of connecting. And so yeah, some of our mentors say it's the best experience they had last year because no one has tapped them on the shoulder to invite them to be part of something like this before. And there's some really interesting research out of the US that says, okay, I'll give you an example. There was a professor teaching computer science in the US, and she asked her students why they were studying computer science. 80% of the men said they were studying it because they enjoyed it. 80% of the women said they were studying computer science because they were invited to.
Right.
So think about that. Someone said you should study this or you should do this, and there is a thing about women having to, you know, get an invitation to come and often inviting your colleagues and saying step forward and do this. And there's something really powerful about that because we often have imposter syndrome and don't put our hand up. So we need to invite people to learn, I think, and be part of whatever experience it is. I think that's absolutely key. And we find that with our girls, you know, we don't really, if we invite them, often they say no. We've had winners of our competition say, I'm not doing that program because I won't be good at it. They go and beat 1,000 other girls out of the program. But at the beginning, they're like, I'm not going to be good at it, so I'm not going to do it. So how many of us are opting out of amazing opportunities because, yeah, we have that imposter syndrome. And again, imposter syndrome, I don't think we've ever found a single person who's ever been found out as an imposter. Just saying.
Well said. Thank you for that. The other thing I'd just like to make an observation about looking at these words is that they're very human words. They're not structural words. They're about how we feel and the experiences that we have and the kinds of ways that we want to be treated. There's no structural or operational words in the characteristics of a positive mentoring experience. It's very much about how we feel as humans. And that becomes an interesting challenge for those of us who have to think about issues like guidelines, how you translate that very human, that very soft dynamic into something like a guideline, which is almost the polar opposite of that. So we need to find some ways to transition those two together. Now, did I notice we have a question in the chat? We've got a couple of minutes before we move on to the next round of conversation. Here you go, Jenine. Here's a cracker from Claudette. How can we smash the stereotypes and the paradigm about what's good enough?
Oh, tough curly one there. What is good enough? I'd say that as a rule, it is what you do is good enough, I guess, as a baseline, I would say. And it's what you make of that. So whether or not you decide to open that up to other people to share your expertise and your wisdom, and even though you may not think you have it, I think everyone has a life experience. You've all got a different story on how you got here. So you've absolutely got something to learn. And I think we look to young people to answer that question, Claudette, because in my experience, the girls that are coming through our program, if we give them an environment where it's a safe place to learn, they're doing something fun that they have somewhat opted into, whether it's part of the class or not. But, and what that does, they're like, yeah, I can kind of do this. Give them a mentor. They're like, I can do this. Like we have 11-year-olds writing 50-page business plans in our program. It's truly mind-blowing. And I would never have imagined that. And there's a variety of things that make that happen. But part of it is just going, you can do this. I can do this. You can do this. And I'm saying that to all of you. If I can do this, every single one of you can do this as well. Like I said, we're literally making it up as we go. So I think, Yeah, get rid of this term imposter syndrome. I think it's an absolute myth, and we all feel inadequate on different days. But I think owning your worth and knowing you are absolutely good enough. And do Amy Cuddy, stand in front of the mirror, stare at yourself in the mirror and go, I'm awesome. I'm awesome. Actually do it. Like it's great, especially if you're going into a big meeting. Definitely.
I must confess, I use that technique quite a bit, and you laugh at yourself the first couple of times you do it, and then you realize, oh, this works, and then you keep doing it. So yeah, it's such a great tip.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that question, Claudette, and kind of the gauntlet thrown down for all of us, I think, to continue to try and smash those stereotypes as much as we can in our own work, in our own networks. Is sort of the enduring challenge for all of us, I think. So we're starting to see some interesting ones come up so far. Clear goals, navigating independence. It's an interesting one. Experienced mentors. Structure, connection and networking. So network coming up again as well. Matching up, connecting. So Melina, interested to get your thoughts on some of these key words that you're seeing. One of the things that has come up in the past couple of sessions when we asked for this kind of feedback is that the characteristics of a positive mentoring experience, most of the words that come up are very human words, a bit how we want to experience mentoring, rather than the structured or the organizational sort of language that comes out of a question like this. I'm interested to get your initial thoughts on what you're seeing, and also whether that issue of how we experience mentoring as human beings and the human dynamics of that are indeed almost as important, if not more important, than the structural platform that we use to do it.
Yeah. Thanks, Alison, for giving me an opportunity to reflect on them, because I think you're right. So a few of these things triggered comments and ideas. So where did it go? So I see the connection and the matching up and good connections. And why I want to comment on that specifically is because mentoring is a relationship, and I think I alluded to it before, and you can meet with someone, have a chat with someone, be connected with someone, and you're just not a good fit.
Yeah.
You don't work with each other, you don't resonate, there's a power difference or anything. Like, it's the same reason why we can't be friends with everyone. And I remember when I was more junior, and even now, when you seek to chat to someone, you almost are so grateful that you want to make it work. And I think it's okay. Like when you're reaching out to meet with people, you don't just go in and say, mentor me, and then you're committed in this relationship. You really need to have a connection with someone. And when it's informal, you can have a coffee with them, you can meet, maybe chat a few times before you embark on seeing them more often, or it just fizzles out because there is no connection. But with, the mentoring program, when you're paired with people, quite often you can get tools to support how it works, but most mentoring programs realize that we are all human and we have different approaches, and they have a considered matching process. So around how you work, what your personality's type, what you need out of the program. And I think that helps to just not randomly pick people and expect it to work. So if you embark on a mentoring relationship, it's okay to get out of one as well.
Right.
If it's not a good fit. And I think it's good to give people permission that you're not going to find a good mentor with everyone that you meet.
Yeah, that's such great advice, isn't it? And something that I think sometimes we feel a little reticent to do, that we're somehow letting ourselves down or letting them down. But that really, if and again, coming back to your point that you made earlier about being open up front about, this is what I'm looking for out of this relationship, and understanding that from the other side too, then when it needs to come to a natural conclusion, however that might happen, then those conversations are a little easier too, I imagine. So let's now move into our second round of speed conversation. And we're going to have a look this time at this issue of incentivizing mentorship. So a lot of what we saw in today's poll, and also in yesterday's, interestingly, was that most of you have had an experience of mentoring that's been more on the informal side than the formal side. And part of one of the areas that the decadal plan is looking at is what does it mean for organisations to bring more formalised or structured mentorship into their organisations, to give it legitimacy, to create opportunities for people. But what are some of the ways that we can make that worth their while? What are some tangible ways that we can incentivize the organisations we work for or with to take mentorship more seriously and bring it into the heart of the work that they do? So we're looking for some tangible ideas from you all, whether things that you've seen working in practice or that you're experiencing where you work now, or just some crazy cracking good ideas that we can include in a portfolio of ways that we can look at as incentives. So we're going to send you on your way again for another 10 minutes. We're going to mix you up. Hopefully you get to talk to some different people this time around, and we'll see you back here shortly. Hello, early arrivals back. Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for that. And again, I look forward to hearing some of your thoughts and suggestions for how we might incentivize some of the organizations getting a little bit more focused about their mentoring activities. So again, what would be great is if you wouldn't mind jumping back into the Menti one more time and sharing we've got a sticky note there for you just to throw in to a sticky note the best idea that you think came out of your conversation, or if you didn't get the chance to share one, throw that one in there too. Some of the ideas you have for incentives for organisations so that we can take those on board as we as the Academy think about some of the ways that we can have an impact on the wider Women in STEM Decadal Plan progression. So I look forward to seeing some of those as you share them. Maggie, if I can turn to you again while we're waiting for some of these ideas to come up. I'm interested to get a sense of your IMNIS experience in what are some of the conversations you've been having with institutions and organisations about this issue of formalising some of their mentoring programs and participation?
The most important thing for organisations is that it fits in with their strategic goals in terms of professional development or career strategies for their students and their postdocs. They want it to sort of fit in with everything else that they're already doing. That's really critical. And so we work very closely with the university coordinators and get their input and feedback as we develop the program and extend the initiatives that we're offering to try and work in with them so that we're not duplicating things, we're not doubling up on resources. We can leverage off what they're already doing and add into and add value in that way. And so we also are very focused on the fact that we're an evidence-based program. So we have a wealth of evidence, 4 years of evidence behind us. And so we have very in-depth surveys that we give our mentees and our mentors to feed back into the program development, but we're also industry-led. And so it's very easy for us to say to organisations, this is an industry-led initiative. It comes from external to academia, and we focus on inputting what IMNIS mentors say that the graduates need in turn to be better employees of tomorrow. And so that is actually really valuable to organisations in the academic sector because they often can't get immediate access to that kind of information.
So this idea about being an evidence base, it's interesting that some of the ideas that we're seeing up on the screen here too around advertising the benefits of mentoring and acknowledgement in formal processes like annual performance reviews and so on. I imagine again that part of the the evidence base is also having feedback loops around some of those more conventional HR type processes that can then be built into a mentoring program to make them even more impactful. Would that be a fair thing to say?
I totally agree with that. I think it's a little bit different with an industry mentoring scheme because a lot of the feedback to industry mentors is more for their own development and their own use, but certainly with respect to their future workforce. But certainly universities also get feedback, particularly from their cohort of mentees and their development. And we get, so it's a two-way street of information. And so they get further insight into what their mentees are doing and what they need and how they can also value add there. We are also starting to give universities individualised information, such that we present a national picture, a state picture, but also then a university-based or research institute-based picture. And that allows them to change their own environment within their own context. So similar to SAGE, if you like, in that approach, where they can reflect on what their mentees are doing and the information that they're gathering and how they can further develop their mentees to be better in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And thank you for everyone sharing these kind of insights and thoughts from your perspective and from the conversations you've been having. And as we mentioned in our pre-session email to all of you, we will be assembling all of this. In fact, the typing that you can hear at my end is Louise madly capturing as much of this insight in real time as she can. So we will be sharing this and again using that as a platform for further conversation. So we're just on the 1 hour now, but I'm going to ask Maggie for a minute or two more and to share with us one final question, which I didn't get a chance to ask, which is, what's your favourite tip for getting the most out of a mentoring relationship?
Engage. Fully embrace the opportunity that's presented to you and respect who's on the other side of the table. I think it's a two-way street in terms of respect and being vulnerable. You have to be prepared to share, but they will also share. I think so. Yeah, engage fully. Go for it.
Hello, everyone who's just returned from your breakout conversation. I hope that that was equally as energising and focused around this issue of tangible ways to incentivise mentorship. And as you can see on the screen there, we're asking you for one last round of feedback to share with us, either here in the Menti, or if you're more comfortable in the Zoom chat, feel free to drop some ideas in there as well. But we're keen to share with everybody some of the ideas, some tangible suggestions that came out of your conversations, and to see whether there are some directions that we can move together as a collective, but also that some leadership organisations like the Academy can have a bit of perspective and a bit of a voice in pushing some of this forward. So bridging the gap between learning and confidence. That's a really important point. Enable employees the time to contribute. That's a really important one too. One of the things that we spoke about even here after yesterday's conversation was this issue of it being a legitimate way of spending time and that it's seen as valued and part of the contribution that you're making to your workplace. Balancing top-down endorsement, bottom-up interest, and sorting out the middle management. Well, there's a challenge for our times too, sorting out middle management. That's a tricky one, but again, an interesting one for us to all think about. Ask about mentor experiences in job interviews. Oh, I like that. That's really interesting. So again, start to normalize the idea of mentoring, and also good for an organisation to show that they care about mentoring enough to ask about it in an interview. Show organisations how to add it to their triple bottom line. Again, build it into those more structural reporting mechanisms. That's really interesting. Removing the disconnect from what leaders say and what's practical in terms of offlining staff. So can I ask that whoever posted that, would you mind just unmuting and explaining what you mean by offlining staff? I'd hate to misinterpret that. Can you just give us a little bit more context around that? It's a curious term. That's all right.
Not everyone has a mic, Alison, as well. So maybe, there we go. It's time outside of work, I think.
Right, thank you. Sorry, that's a good point. Time outside of work, right, again, so interesting. So communicating the benefits, outlining competitive advantage we've talked about. So some really interesting ideas in there that we can mix and match with some of the ideas that came out yesterday. But Jenine, again, if I can get you to reflect on some of the things that you're seeing here, and again, thinking about some of those, become a Women in STEM Decadal Plan champion, thank you for that. But some of the conversations that you have with some of the organisations that you interact with, how do you think they might respond to some of these ideas?
I'd like to think they want to be guided. I don't believe we have to have the conversation anymore about that we need mentoring. And why it's important. Even if it's for ticking a box for an organization, I actually don't care. Tick the box, just do it, to be really honest. But I think they need practical ways to get involved. And that's why we literally go to them. We say, you can partner with us, probably give us X amount of money, and then we give you the opportunity to have, that just keeps us and our programs running as a not-for-profit. But what that does is you can then nominate X amount of mentors from your organization to come and work with us, and we give them the experience. So you don't actually have to do it yourself. And I think that's the problem. They think they have to set up their own formal mentoring program. They have to go through all this stuff. And actually they don't. There are other ways of tapping into other programs where they can have a huge amount of value. Don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think that's key. Don't reinvent the wheel.
And that's what a fantastic kind of idea to finish on today. I noticed that we're right on time, but this idea for organisations that they, that there are others that can help them, can support them, can partner with them, and that have been there before them. And as you say, Jenine, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Welcome back, everyone. You'll notice that we have the Menti back up on the screen again for capturing this final round of conversation that we were talking about tangible ways that STEM organisations can incentivise mentorship. Again, if you'd like to throw some of the key, just a post-it note idea from your conversation into the Menti, that would be fantastic, so that Melina and I can have a chat about what we're seeing there. But also, if you'd rather, again, put a more extensive thought or suggestion into the chat, you're most welcome to do that too. So we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll have a look at seeing what some of these ideas are. So we're already seeing a pattern even in the first three that have come through there, which is, opportunities to meet face to face and have that, interaction, specific KPIs and intentional engagement. Again, interesting to have those there around organisations incentivising and matching what you can get out of mentorship with what an organisation looks for around, KPIs, workforce development, and so on. So, yep, included in KPIs coming through there quite strongly. Interesting, this idea of top-down approach and encouraging execs and leaders to mentor junior colleagues and seeing that potentially as being part of their role and indeed an expectation that they will do that.
7689819.
And routine training in mentoring, encouraging people to develop their skills. And I imagine that might be for mentors and mentees potentially could be useful there. Learning from other industries, how do businesses do it? Melina, that's an interesting one. Can I ask you to reflect on that again, given the your experience in seeking some discipline-based mentorship around social entrepreneurship, for example, and moving outside of your realm or outside of your field to go looking for expertise in others. In the work that you do with Franklin Women, are you also kind of staying attuned to what business sector or education sector or other sectors are doing around mentorship that we can all benefit from? Is there a shared pool of, good mentoring that organisations can do or best practice guidelines that already exist?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what we've done with pretty much everything that we do development on with Franklin Women is I got really, and I know everyone's just trying to do their best, but I got really frustrated when I was a postgrad and they do a talk on social media, but they would get researchers dabbling in social media to come talk to me, which was great. But they've also just learned as they've gone as well and might, like you said, not know best practice, the tools, how to cut corners. And so every time we do something, we bring an expert from that topic area or field in. So the facilitators for the content for our mentoring program are leadership consultants. So they have expertise in inclusive leadership, of which mentoring is one of the toolkits of being an inclusive leader, right. And also around mentoring. And they actually delivered this mentoring, the program itself, within the business and finance sector. And so these are big revenue, high output organizations, right? So they understand, and they've invested in this long before we brought it to the health and medical research sector, because they knew that there was a return on investment.
Right.
So it's changing that shift, and that comes around that evaluation and metrics sort of around these things to really justify it to organizations that it's not a fluffy feel good thing to do. If you want to retain the talent that we have in our sector, and you as a leader want to stay in touch, ahead of your game, connected with the upcoming generation and their approaches, which is very different, then this is something that you have to do. And then because of that, then that just changes the cultural shift. And it's really tricky because a lot of these things, and I've seen this with the Franklin Women Mentoring Program, ticking a box doesn't work.
Sorry, we're just going to mute someone there who
having a much more interesting conversation. But yeah, like it's a tricky one, because you're going through this stage, which I guess our sector is going to go through, where we really want to encourage it and have more people do it. But, you know, it's got to be top down in a real leadership sort of way, so that we change the culture that this is just part of how we do things, no different than it would be applying for a grant.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people feel pushed into doing it, and it's a bad experience for them, and it's also a bad experience for the mentee, because one of the things that we saw on the earlier slide about a good relationship is authenticity and actually being committed and to sharing. So we're going to have to navigate this bit of a tricky period until it becomes
normalized,
you know, just how we do business.
Yeah. I love, just by the way, before we move into kind of closing, I love some of these ideas that have come up later on in the bottom end of the Menti here. This idea of Mentor Monday, classic, but move into campaign mode. I think that's a fantastic idea. The other interesting one, mentorship requirement for leadership grants by funding bodies. So build a requirement in around, you know, in order to be a successful grant applicant, you need to have a mentoring component in what you're doing. That's an interesting area to explore, I think. And I like this idea of the mentoring infinity loop. It's blows my tiny mind what that might involve, but I'm here for it, and incentivized in some way. Again, I imagine as we kind of, you know, you loop around, that kind of builds on itself. And this idea of peer mentoring circles, solving problems together. Again, that's a really interesting kind of pivot, isn't it? Almost towards mentoring as collaboration as mentoring. Well, maybe there's an infinity loop in there too somewhere. Look, here I go. You'll have me here all day now. So thank you very much for sharing those ideas. They're brilliant, and we will combine them with the ideas from your colleagues from other sessions. So we're now pretty much at time. Hasn't that gone quickly? I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Melina, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a delight to host you and to chat with you.
Thanks, Alison. And I've made so many new connections as well now. So I'm looking forward to chatting to many of you afterwards as well.
So before you all go, I have a catastrophically busy slide to show you, but with some very important things that you could do next. Part of what we like to do here with the STEM Women Cafes is hopefully energize you to continue and take some of what you've heard here today and do something small or something large as a result of that. So a couple of things to put on your to-do list. Check STEM Women's blog, which we'll be sending out to all of you after the session. You probably heard Louise madly capturing notes while we were talking here. So there'll be a post-session summary. We'll be stitching together some of the video content for people to be able to use. We'd also encourage you to reach out to your peers in the STEM Women network for mentoring connections. The wonderful thing about the STEM Women community is that we're now 3,100 strong across more than 4,000 disciplines. So I challenge you not to find someone in that group to be able to connect with and share some experiences with. To that end, we also would ask you to recommend STEM Women to your colleagues, join if they're eligible, but also use the STEM Women platform to find good speakers for conferences or good, members of advisory boards, and join our Slack community if you're interested. We're now at around about 60 people in there. So if you're into that thing, then we welcome you as well. The STEM Women newsletter is where we do advertise these cafe sessions. If you're a member of STEM Women, you're automatically on that list. And if you're not a member of STEM Women, we encourage you to join so that you can join the cafes and the newsletter. And finally, you'll see a massive bunch of logos there on the screen. These are our Women in STEM Decadal Plan champions, currently a group of amazingly influential organisations right around the country. If you don't see your organisation there and you think they should be, please reach out to us so that we can start a conversation and see if we can really mobilise and strengthen the organisational support for the Women in STEM Decadal Plan. So on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for spending time with us today. I hope that you've made some new friends, stretched your thinking around mentoring, and perhaps got some ideas for yourself about how you'd like to progress. We're always happy to hear any feedback that you have. You've got our contact details there, plus you can find us through the STEM Women website. We hope that you have a fantastic rest of your Thursday, and we look forward to seeing you at the next cafe session sometime soon. Bye for now.